This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Operational Decision Compass meeting. Good to have you all here today. And I'm Penelope Brown, the group leader for this Decision Compass group. All right, so today's topic is going to be lean manufacturing in the age of digital. And we've got some really good topic leaders joining us from Protolabs, Rob Bodor and Joe Goodhart. But before we get going, I'm going to give you a few announcements from the MLC. Of course, after they give you your presentation today, we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A, and I'll give you some information about some upcoming decision calls we've got booked. If you don't mind, before we get going, just give yourself a check that you are currently muted on the line so we can make sure that we don't have any background noise. But of course, at the end, when we get to that Q&A, we're more than happy to have you come up and give us your questions there. So just give that a check real quick, make sure that you're muted before we get started. Whoops, hit too many buttons here. Okay, so we've got our registration open for our flagship event, Rethink, the Manufacturing Leadership Council Summit, taking place again as a virtual event this year, June 22nd to 24th. We're building a really exciting agenda for this event. You can check out some of our sessions that we've already got booked and a little bit more information on mlcrethink.com. We also definitely encourage you to engage your teams with this as well and take a bit of a divide and conquer approach to come to this event. But no matter what your function is within manufacturing, no matter what industry you're in, this is really an event you need to come to learn some of the latest concepts and ideas that are happening around digital manufacturing right now. We'll have some inspiring keynotes. We'll have some really good case studies that'll show you really start to finish how manufacturers are getting these things done. And of course, some one-on-one sessions with technology vendors as well and think tanks, so you can really get a deep look at some of these newer technologies. And of course, before that, we've also got an MLC virtual plant tour at IBM happening April 20th. They're going to be showing us one of their facilities in Hungary on the theme of IBM manufacturing, people, process, and technology. But that's not all. We've also got a lot of other interesting virtual plant tours booked through the end of the year. Exclusive for attendees to that aforementioned Rethink event, we'll have one at Denso on June 29th. And we've also got sessions booked at BASF and Johnson & Johnson. So be sure to mark your calendars now for those, and you can find out some information about that on our website at that URL there at the bottom of the slide. One other virtual event we've got coming up, our Manufacturing Leadership Awards Virtual Gala. We did announce our winners back on March 15th. Glad to have Protolabs here today, as they were actually one of our winners again this year. And we're hoping to really make it another fun virtual event. We'll have a pre-ceremony red carpet, which will be new for us this year. Virtual photo booth, so you can take some fun photos of your watch party. And of course, during the gala itself, you'll find out who our high achievers are, our manufacturers of the year, and the manufacturing leader of the year. And if you want to hang out afterwards, we'll have a really nice post-gala after party. So again, URL down at the bottom of this slide. Go ahead and RSVP. It's open to anyone to attend. You just need to RSVP to the event. So please make sure that you plan on joining us for that. Also new this year, we have our MLC Masterclass series, and we've got a session, a Rethink deep dive actually coming up tomorrow on 5G. So these deep dives are actually extensions of some of the topics that we discussed at last year's Rethink session. And we've also got some webinars that give a little bit more high-level view of technologies and other topics around manufacturing. Next month, we'll also be introducing some tech talks, which will be some short Q&As we have with technology and manufacturing leaders. So again, URLs down at the bottom of the screen. You can find out some more information about upcoming topics we have for these. I think you're going to really want to make sure you come to these sessions, because they've been really well informative and very well attended as well. So mark your calendars for these. All right, so as anyone who's working on a digital initiative in manufacturing can probably tell you, data collection is not an issue. Whether you're doing it yourself or using an outside vendor, chances are you've found plenty of ways to gather operational data. However, finding out which data is the most useful and getting it to the right decision maker is a much greater challenge. But while digital manufacturing might be a newer practice within your plant, chances are lean initiatives are nothing new at all. You've likely been doing Kaizen events for some time to help eliminate waste, improve your customer value, and apply continuous improvement throughout your operations. The good news is there are ways you can take those well-established lean principles and establish them or apply them to your digital strategy. In essence, lean can be applied to digital, and digital can feed lean to make it even more effective. I'm pleased to welcome Rob Bodor and Joe Goodhart of Protolabs, who are with us today to share their views on the intersections between these two important topics and the ways manufacturers can apply them to their own operations. Rob and Joe, the floor is yours.
Super, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. As Penelope mentioned, I'm here with Joe Goodhart, who's our Director of Operational Excellence at Protolabs, and we are really excited to talk to you today about a topic that we're passionate about at Protolabs, about how to combine digital systems, processes, and data that we're all living with and have invested in here in recent years with lean principles and processes to make sure that we're getting the most out of both of these, especially now in our changing world. So we look forward to a really good discussion, and we invite you to type in your questions, and we'll engage with those at the end of the talk. So I'm going to start by just providing a little bit of an introduction to Protolabs to provide some context about how we think about manufacturing in these topics. And then I want to talk to you about some megatrends that we're seeing in manufacturing that are changing the ecosystem of manufacturing and creating both opportunities and pressures for supply chains today. And then Joe will take you through really how we think about digital and lean and the confluence of those two and the value that they can bring to one another. And then I'll share a little bit more about how we've implemented some of those concepts at Protolabs. So looking forward to a good discussion today. So for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Protolabs is a contract manufacturer, and we are truly digital from the core. We were founded a little over 2 decades ago, actually by a software engineer who was really passionate about manufacturing and solving problems in manufacturing. And so our end-to-end systems are built around a digital thread, and I'll explain that today. Also, we recently acquired 3D Hubs, which is also a digital platform and complements our in-house manufacturing capabilities with a network of manufacturing partners to extend the ways that we can meet our customers' needs. On the next slide, I'll describe some of our services. We go to market with four services: injection molding, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, and 3D printing. And those 4 services represent about 17 discrete manufacturing processes that we offer through our in-house capabilities, as well as our third-party capabilities now with the network. So those are the different technologies and services that we offer, contract manufactured parts in. And we operate globally. We have offices and manufacturing facilities in country in each of the regions where we operate, in the Americas, in Europe, and in Japan within our in-house capabilities. That's depicted on the next slide. And then, of course, with our manufacturing partner network, we've got networks of partners in all those regions as well, in Asia, in Europe, and in the Americas. Thank you. And then, of course, we serve many different industries and companies, from very large multinationals to small and mid-sized companies as well. Now, if we transition, I'm really excited to talk to you about some of these trends. And as we get into the discussion at the end, I'd love to hear from you on what you're seeing in these trends and how you're seeing them affecting you as well. But to start us off, I really want to talk about the biggest trend that was a shock to all of us here in the past year on the next slide. And that, of course, was the COVID-19 pandemic, right? This was, a very big disruption, right, to all of our manufacturing and our supply chains. And, a recent study by Gartner, recent survey of supply chain professionals, they said that the majority of these professionals said that their supply chains were really not designed to handle this level of disruption. And, most of them identified their supply chains or characterized them as being designed, to manage cost, right? And focused around efficiency, assuming a relatively, kind of fixed world framework. And so the big disruption that we all experienced and was so devastating for so many of us in our businesses and our supply chains, was really problematic. I'm sure this doesn't come as a surprise to any of us. What was interesting is that close to 90% of these same supply chain professionals said that they're going to be investing in agility and in resilience to make their supply chains more robust in the coming years, and particularly in the next 2 years. So this is clearly forcing a sea change with supply chains as we go forward. And so that's really interesting and something that I want to talk to you about. But, this happened, of course, this disruption happened in the context of some other trends that were already putting pressure on supply chains. And so I want to talk to you about the first of those here on the next slide. And that is the shortening of product life cycles. So again, I'm really interested to hear, how you guys are experiencing some of these trends as well as we get into the discussion. But, one study found that fully half of company revenues were coming from products that had been launched in the last 3 years, right? And so as you think about the implications of that to the supply chain and the challenges that companies have, right? We're having to launch more products more frequently, making, less revenue per product. And so that's putting a lot of pressure on our ability to find the right suppliers, validate them, and make sure that, we have stability and supply as there's so much underlying change. The second megatrend that we feel has been underlying this even before the pandemic was, I'm sorry, can we move to the next slide?
Yeah. Rob, if I may interrupt you for a brief second, it
Sure.
seems audio is going in and out.
My audio is going in and out?
Yes, I have a hunch you may just be covering your microphone with your hands on occasion.
Okay, I will thank you for that input. So I'll work to make sure that we address that.
Thank you.
Okay. So let me give you this example. So this example highlights both the disruption from the pandemic and the need for the rapid response, right? So Breathe 99 is a startup company whose product actually made the cover of Time magazine last year. And Breathe makes these N99 masks. They call it the B2 mask. This uses an advanced filtration system for high level of protection while ensuring breathability and so forth for long wear. And you can see that it uses a replaceable filter system. And we helped Breathe in both prototyping and production for injection molding to rapidly iterate their designs and get then these products to market quickly in response to the pandemic. If we move to the next slide, I want to highlight the other megatrend that we're seeing, which is really around SKU proliferation, right? And the proliferation of more and more product SKUs in the marketplace in recent years. And, as we think about it, there are two underlying trends that are helping to drive that. And I'll talk about the first one here, which is the Internet of Things. And, when we talk about this, I want to separate that from like the industrial IoT, but really the Internet of Things, where IoT and Internet technologies are being put into customer end devices. So I actually believe that that IoT and this trend is actually one of the largest sea changes that we will see in our lifetimes. You know, one study found that is forecasting that there are 50 billion IoT devices that will be in the field by 2030. Now think about that. That is something like 8 times the population of the world, right? Of these kinds of internet-enabled devices that will be in the marketplace in under 10 years. This is a tremendous increase in products, and think about all the new products that we're launching that are IoT enabled, in addition to existing products, right? New versions of existing products that are IoT enabled. So it's a tremendous tremendous trend that's driving a lot of change in our world. And in addition to driving, these additional SKUs and putting more products into the marketplace, IoT is also driving shortening of product lifetimes. So when you think about it, taking the internet technology and putting it into a physical device, the lifetime of that device now becomes dominated by the speed of the internet, not by the physical properties of the device itself. So an example I like to use in this is watches, right? So I'm sure many of us are old enough to have owned an analog watch in our lifetime. I still have one. In fact, the analog watch that I have was given to me by my grandfather, and he got it in the 1930s. So it's almost a 90-year-old watch now, right? And it still works. I have to wind it. Honestly, I don't wear it very often, but it still works. I've had to replace the band a few times and so forth. Now, I'm sure many of us on this call have a smartwatch. And if I were to ask you, will you still own and use that same smartwatch 3 years from now? Most of you will probably tell me, no, Rob, that's ridiculous. Why would I use a smartwatch that's 3 years old? Right? Because again, putting the internet technology into the physical device now makes the lifetime of that device really tied to the speed of change of the internet. And so this is a massive trend that is reshaping our world in a lot of ways, and manufacturers have to respond to that. So the next topic on SKU proliferation that I want to highlight and trend is that of personalization and mass customization, and that's covered on the next slide. So this is something that is more pronounced in some industries than in others, but certainly personalization trends in consumer, in medical devices, and several other industries are becoming a major driver. And it's a great opportunity, right? This kind of change creates opportunities for customer retention, customer loyalty, and introducing more and more value for customers, as well as premium pricing. So it's a big win for those companies who can leverage it. But it also makes us have to rethink our supply chains, right? Because now we're making, highly discrete, customized parts in small batches versus a more mass model approach that we've done in the past. So as we think about this and reflect on it, on the next slide, you can kind of see the implications that these trends have meant for manufacturers. And the pandemic highlighted some of these, but I think a lot of this was already undergoing, right? Where we're seeing reductions in development time, increased variety that we need to manage, putting more pressure on us being able to effectively and efficiently drive product development in the context of these shorter payback periods, and ultimately reduced investment per product. And so it's put pressure on supply chains to adapt, right? To become more flexible and to be faster and more efficient. Now, the good news is that manufacturing has evolved over the last, several decades in order to be able to meet these needs, right? And in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about that. Over time, we've seen a lot of increasing digitalization of manufacturing, and you could see pictures of a bygone era, right, where things were highly manual, and juxtapose that with much more modern manufacturing that we have today. Right, today we use digital definitions of products, digital systems, digital measurement, right, and a high degree of automation. And as you think about these eras and how these things have changed, right, on the right-hand side, we're depicting kind of what's often called the fourth industrial revolution. And look at the explosion of tools that have happened, in the context of this in the last few decades. Right, technologies and data, the processes that have become available, and the integration of the internet again into these different manufacturing processes, causing this explosion of data, right? And it brings with it some challenges, and those are the focus of our discussion today. So with that, I invite Joe Goodhart to tell you more about this, how we think about it, and what we're doing about it.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Rob. So yeah, let's talk a bit about how we at Protolabs are better managing that digital transformation by leveraging Lean, something you all know very well. So on the next slide, we think about Lean, when we think about digital, there are certainly similar outcomes that both are aiming for. Lean, of course, we want to eliminate waste, take out non-value added steps. Digital, we're trying to make things more efficient by integrating all aspects of the business. They both want to add value to the customer. They both solve problems to meet the needs of those stakeholders and do so through iteration or continuous improvement. But to sustain and thrive, they really need a cultural change. A change to the way we work and behave in order to truly drive those sustainable results. So certainly, again, there are similar objectives, speed and simplification to drive customer satisfaction, but often Lean and digital are seen as unrelated efforts. So on this Venn diagram slide, we want to talk about how do we unite these two? Because digital and Lean are not mutually exclusive. They really need each other. They need each other to be their most impactful. On one side, Lean needs data to truly embrace scientific thinking, to be more efficient and really targeted about how we go about making improvements. Whereas digitalization, as we've talked about, can deliver a ton of data. And it really needs those Lean concepts of define the problem, analyze for root cause, to apply the right tool and turn that data into useful information. So both these philosophies are compelling, but for optimal and sustainable results, it's the application we got to focus on, the application of Lean, the application of digital. That cannot be random, but instead it has to be purposeful. You'll hear me say it a lot in the next few minutes about being purposeful. So the question, how do we unite Lean with digital, IT with operational technology, people with technical systems? How do we apply the right tool at the right time and generate the most value? So on the next slide, let's look at Lean. So the Lean philosophy, the Lean principles are I believe, tried and true, and I believe in them 100%. I've seen those principles develop operating models for various types of companies. But the Lean tools, on the other hand, the tools need to be applied purposefully. So setting out to eliminate waste, for example, can be a wasteful exercise in itself if it's not done with a specific goal or that target condition in mind. Now, this is not to say that this eliminate waste mindset should be ignored. It's great for empowering people to make improvements in the processes they work in. At Protolabs, we definitely want this. We encourage it. Everyone, every day is in fact the Proto Excellence culture we strive for. Because that type of empowerment, is not only compounding, but it drives the best solutions through engagement and collaboration. And when you have that level of engagement, that level of collaboration, that's going to drive your sustainable results. But on the larger initiatives, and to some extent with everyone every day, we really need to understand where we want to go and what is specifically standing in the way of us getting there. And that's where technology and data can be helpful, but it has to be the right tool, the right data for the right problem. And with this increase in data access, it can actually become overwhelming. We talk about go see, and the more you look, the more you see. Now there are seemingly infinite number of ideas, but we still have this finite number of resources to attack those ideas. So it's important that we focus our improvements. Now on the next slide, we'll look at the digital side of things. And, in recent memory, we've sort of gone from this data desert to an ocean of data. But the mere fact of having access to more data is not necessarily satisfying our needs. So we end up with sort of data everywhere, but not a drop to drink. So the generation of data itself also can be wasteful. In lean terms, we overproduce data, we overprocess data, we have too much data in inventory that we have to store it. So again, the digitalization philosophy is great, but just because we can apply technology doesn't mean we should. We can't apply technology just for technology's sake. It has to be purposeful, again, purposeful. Apply it purposefully and get sustainable and valuable results. So, unification of lean and digital. Mentioned earlier, lean needs data, data needs lean for each to be most impactful. Because without lean, data can be random back, or without data, really lean, we can have random acts of Kaizen. Lean needs that data. Otherwise, we end up with random acts of Kaizen. We have good intent, but potentially no impact in what we're trying to achieve. And data and technology without lean, as I mentioned, can be overwhelming and confusing if we're not clear on what we want to use it for, the problem we're trying to solve. You can't just automate a bad process and expect all of your problems to be solved. But if we take a lean approach to digital application, to the implementation of digital, to the ongoing leveraging of the digital process, we take that lean approach, that combination of lean and digital can really have an exponential effect on performance and really accelerate that end-to-end optimization of the entire value stream that we're all trying to strive for. That is what we call the digital thread, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But as we look at uniting lean and digital, how do you get to that click moment? So we rely on, you probably recognize these principles, organizational excellence principles from the Shingo framework. If we advance one click, prior to applying technology or diving into that sea of data, on the next slide, we rely on purpose. So that's the first thing we do. We rely on purpose to clearly articulate what it is we're trying to achieve for our customers and our business. Then we apply scientific thinking to define the problems that are standing in the way of achieving those objectives. So we need to ask the right questions in order to understand how we'll go about achieving those objectives. So then, and only then, on the right-hand side here, we can apply the right data to validate the problem, analyze the potential causes, and continuously validate the solution we put in place. So we do the systemic thinking to understand the change, the impact that change will have on the entire value stream. So we use some systemic thinking to look at that making sure that an optimization in one area is not going to sub-optimize another area. And then we apply the principles of respect for every individual and continuous improvement by really arming the right people, so those closest to the work, with the right technology and the right data to monitor and improve the results. And you'll see that when we show our digital thread that this in fact includes the customer because we're aiming at taking out the frustration from their experience and adding value to what we're trying to do with the customer. And then finally on the next slide, we'll come back to our Venn diagram. Again, lean and digitalization, they need to work together, to form that digital thread throughout the entire system. And again, to empower those closest to the work to drive efficiencies and improvements with the right technology, the right data at the right time. We have that, we can continuously improve that delivery of value to the customer. And that's what we're all trying to achieve. So we've talked about the digital thread quite a bit, mentioned a number of times. Rob will take us through what that looks like at Protolabs.
Thank you, Joe. We can move on to the next slide or two here. Yeah, go one more. So wanted to give you a sense of how we think about the digital thread and the flow that you know a product would go through the value stream in our operation. So if we walk through this digital thread, you know, it starts with the CAD file and then goes all the way through our manufacturing process through to fulfillment. Now, of course, this is linear for a given part, but we represent it here as continuous because we find that customers will often iterate based on what they learn. And so if you start with the upper left, where you can see the 3D CAD model, right? That's the start because that provides the digital definition of what the customer wants made, and they'll upload that along with other digital assets, right, to begin. And that upload essentially becomes the request for quote. We then generate a quote using our design for manufacturability analysis, and I'll highlight that area a little bit more in an upcoming slide. It then goes through, you know, they place the order, and then we do the manufacturing through our production. We then, you know, take it to finishing, quality control, shipping, and fulfillment, right? And I'll highlight both the quoting and the DFM process, as well as how we do digital quality on the next slide. So we start again with the digital file, and we actually virtually manufacture the part as part of the quoting process. So through the quoting process, we create a digital twin of the finished part, and we have a digital twin of our entire process end to end. And so we share the digital twin of the finished part with the customer as part of the quote, and we do this instantly in some services and in a few hours in others. And that allows us to take out a lot of waste from the customer process because up front we can very quickly give them design input. We can let them know if they have any issues with their part, and they can be assured of the manufacturability right away. And then on the next slide, I want to highlight how we think about digital quality as well. So we use technologies like model-based definition, as well as interpreting the 2D drawing and translating the 2D drawing into a digital form that then ties back to the CAD file so that we can create this contract with the customer. That also then allows us to automate the inspection. And so we can manage customer parts in small batches at scale by doing this, where in the past we would have had to have, you know, skilled technicians who would program the CMM and, you know, translate the the features from the file or the 2D drawing into the manufacturing process. So this really allows us to take a lot of waste out of the back end and ensure that what we're delivering to the customer meets their needs and is something that we can share with them right from the beginning. If you go to the next slide, I love working in manufacturing. And one of the reasons why I love it is because we get to work on some of the coolest stuff and have a positive impact in the world in so many different ways. And I'm sure you all feel that. And it's, one of the great things about our industry. But here's just an example that I thought was really cool around this. That we did for Lockheed Martin and for NASA, where we were able to leverage our design for manufacturability and the rapid manufacturing that we do to help develop the design of storage units that will be used in space. So pretty cool. If you move to the next slide, so just as a takeaway, what this allows us to do is really remove waste. We've been able to kind of automate a lot of these process steps throughout the digital thread and minimize the queuing, right? Which allows for much greater speed for our customers, but also, as I discuss on the next slide, from a lean standpoint, really did a lot to. You can move to the next, just if you click. Thank you. Reduce a lot of the waste and the queuing times, right? And so, when you think about manufacturing, we offer parts in as little as 1 day in many of our services. However, and sometimes customers, ask us, how can we possibly do that? Well, many of you would not be surprised when, we would say that, look, the amount of time that's actually spent in the mill is less than 24 hours. And a lot of the end-to-end time, right, is around just wait and queuing. And so the digital thread and how we've, implemented that has allowed us to take a lot of that waste and wait time out of the process among some of the other things. And so if you move to the next slide, you can kind of see where customers get to use us as a result of that and the benefits that can provide.
Yeah, as the slide advances there, I'll say that, the first time I walked through a Protolabs facility as a manufacturing guy, I was looking for all the WIP, and there's just not much WIP out there. And that all starts with upfront, how the digital thread minimizes those queues going through the entire value.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So the way that customers find benefit from this is kind of in two stages. Either if it's in the case of prototyping, through speed to market, right? By being able to manufacture the part very quickly, they can get that product into market quickly. But also in terms of reducing design risk, because by being able to quickly generate parts and test them in the end manufacturing process that they're going to use, they're able to do a number of design iterations and really speed their whole prototyping process and thereby reduce the design risk of their finished part and in taking it into production. And then as they bring it into production, these same benefits allow them to reduce supply chain risk, right? We can respond very quickly, which means that they don't have to keep inventories. There's no minimum order quantity. And so this again helps manage the volatile demand that we're seeing more and more in today's market, based on these trends that we've discussed. So I'll leave you with one last example case study that we had. And this was for a really cool virtual reality product that went through the transition from prototyping to production using this digital manufacturing approach. They did multiple iterations of 3D printed parts and then transitioned to injection molding of prototypes to make sure that their design was manufacturable, and then moved on to low volume production with us in this case, and that happened all in a very short period of time. So, thank you very much for listening today and for engaging with us. And, if we just move to the next slide, I think we'll, open it up for discussion and dialogue.
Thank you so much there, Rob and Joe. I saw we had a lot of comments come in through that. And I just have to ask before we get into that, what was that? That was an interesting project that you just showed at the end, a scent-based. What exactly was the application for that?
So there's virtual reality and applications for it for training. And that particular one was also used by the military to help soldiers coming back from the field. So yeah, really, really cool.
All right, well, we did have quite a few interesting comments come in through the chat. Of course, if anybody else has anything to add to the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question verbally, you're allowed to do that as well. I see one comment here that you cannot automate a bad process and expect it to work. Thank you for that statement, and I will use it a lot. So yeah, definitely some good wisdom there. All right, so Steve Moskowitz has a comment here. With data science, I've seen the struggle between data scientists who know data, but not process, and process engineers who know process. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I'm reading this wrong. But not data and getting them to work together can be a challenge. So I think what you're saying is there's data scientists that know data and process engineers that know process, but not data. So getting those to work together can be a challenge. Are you adding digital skills to your lean experts, or are you combining digital and lean experts into a combined team?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'll start and invite Joe to build upon it. So I think your point is that you need to build those skills that maybe are traditionally across different disciplines into your experts, which we absolutely have to do and is a challenge. But then it's also about combining the right people into the teams, right, and creating somewhat more cross-disciplinary teams to solve these problems. And I think we absolutely have to do them at both levels. The quicker one is building those cross-functional teams together, and we've done that in many areas in order to make this effective. Taking manufacturing engineers along with data scientists, and in our case also often our software teams into combined teams using our lean approaches in order to be able to drive some of this impact. But at the same time, we absolutely are working to upskill our employees around data and their use of data, and we do that in a variety of ways with our learning systems. But Joe, I'll invite you to add your thoughts.
Yeah, all of the above are true. What we're doing in a more practical sense is more of the teaming in the front end. The phrase that we use is to get a diagonal cross section of the organization into a project. And what that means is you get people from various spots of the value stream, as well as various levels. And certainly that does include teaming up process folks with data folks. We also certainly do train the entire organization on the lean principles, because if you keep it at a principle level, those can and do apply anywhere and everywhere. And then, as Rob said, we are trying to get people more educated on the data side as well. But it starts with the teams.
All right, we have another comment and question from Mark Holloway saying, in my opinion, the challenge is lean has become more focused on a single-minded approach to reducing costs. This is in conflict with a supply chain that needs to respond to a VUCA world, where we need to be able to use lean principles and problem solving to optimize agile versus minimizing cost. What are your thoughts on this?
Joe, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can take that one. I agree with what you're saying. If your lean program, first of all, is strictly focused on costs, it more than likely, and this has been proven, is not going to sustain over time. What you really need to look when you think about lean, yeah, we can gain cost reduction through lean, but the majority of it, again, comes from removing that non-value added waste and creating capacity. So we're creating capacity to take on more revenue. And it's really, you broaden lean out into the principles, and it's about creating that really a lean culture that gets the right people engaged and empowers everyone to take ownership of their process. And then also align the entire organization as to what we're trying to achieve as an organization and deliver results. But if you simply focus on lean as a cost-cutting initiative, more than likely it's not going to sustain. And yeah, we have Agile in our software development, so we leverage lean and Agile together as well. Rob, what do you want to add?
Well, I think you covered it really well. I think the only thing I would add is that I think the frame that you're using really matters here, right? So I think when lean is applied in very much a fixed frame kind of mindset, right, where the world is fixed and the external inputs are relatively constant, then I've seen it be more used in terms of kind of cost reduction, where I think, as Joe highlighted, ultimately this is about removing waste, improving scalability, flexibility, agility, which are benefits that you then get with growth, right? You as you grow now, the investment is therefore less because you've made it more productive, and that's how we aspire to use it and have been focused on it.
All right, we had another comment getting back to that sort of process and digital intersection. I'm sorry if I'm getting your name wrong. I believe it's Ruzdi Hidri. I see it as a stepwise process with defined responsibilities. Experts and lean teams develop the floor process. Data scientists analyze and report recommended adjustments. The experts reset and next hand it over to the automation. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I think that's largely accurate. Of course, sometimes these things are a little bit fluid, right? And you want to be able to have iteration within each of those steps as well. But certainly, I think having the automation be that last step makes a lot of sense because, as we discussed in the talk, right, you don't want to automate waste. And so there's definitely work that has to be done before that to identify the optimal process and make sure that, that you've tested that and evaluated it before you automate it. So I would agree with that at the high level. Yeah. Joe, would you add anything?
Yeah, I would agree to it. The only probably nuance I would add in there is that let's just make sure that they're not like hard handoffs, that we're, sort of collaborating throughout the entire process with both sides of the ball.
Right.
All right, I know you guys also wrote a really interesting article about this that appeared in Business Insider. I'm actually going to call up this URL and put it in the chat so everyone can take a look at it. And just so you know, we will have a recording of this available probably in about a week. So if you want to come back to it again, but we've still got plenty of time. Oh, I got a question here from Jay Hilton. Have you guys done any work to leverage digital tools and data to identify, prioritize, and engage your teams in Kaizen activities? And how are you identifying your largest opportunities and then engaging your teams in those improvements?
Well, that's what Joe does every day. So Joe, I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so, as I mentioned in the talk early on, there's always seemingly this infinite number of ideas, but we have a finite number of resources. So the prioritization of those ideas is key. So the question here is, have we leveraged any tools to identify, prioritize, engage in Kaizen activities? And the answer is yes. I'm sure you all probably have used like, catch cards or Kaizen suggestion type boards. And we have those in place in our plants as well. But we have begun to move to more of a digital platform as well, where anybody in the organization can go into our intranet homepage. And what we'll have is ability to click and submit an idea. And we make them do a little more work than that. You know, they got to form it in the phrase of what's the problem you're trying to solve, and what do you think the target condition looks like. And then that's the input mechanism, and we can take that and actually go sit down with a person to really understand all of the other elements that go along with it. Are we improving capacity? Are we improving lead time? Is it a revenue opportunity? Is it a cost opportunity? And all of those help us then prioritize it. And we have a portfolio tool that is a digital portfolio tool now that helps us keep it evergreen and make sure that we're always focusing on the most important and most impactful things in the organization. Again, to solve that problem of we've got finite resources, but an infinite amount of ideas.
Anything you want to add to that, Rob?
Nope, I think Joe did a good job of describing how we do that.
All right, another question from Carl Hutter asking, to enable distributed manufacturing of digital designs on a global scale, how might the process of product validation and certification be transformed? Is this a potential blockchain application?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So first of all, let me say I'm not an expert at blockchain, but I think that problem is a really important one. And you know, we've talked about this issue of quality and how we can ensure quality and use digital to help provide that assurance, and do so at scale, and do so even in customized applications quickly and efficiently. And we think there's a lot of potential there. And you couple that with product validation certification, and I think the digital thread, you know, provides a lot of value in that, because we can ensure, using digital technologies, that every stage of value that's being added, right, that you know, that we can do validation kind of at every stage, as well as at the end, and inspecting in that capability at the end. So I think blockchain, with you know how that technology enables you know the guarantee of data integrity from one step to the next, would be a really good application for something like that. It's not something that we've invested into at this point, though.
Any thoughts on that one, Joe?
Yeah, I think that it is certainly something that could become a differentiator and also a disruptor. So it's an interesting approach.
Yeah, I suspect that we'll be seeing that in the future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, we've got James Campbell saying, this book has some interesting information about coupling lean ideas to AI optimization, especially with regard to management of queues. For example, inventory within the WI, work in progress chain, and machine utilization. So there's a nice link in there to an Amazon ebook, so be sure to check that out. Any last questions from our attendees today before we move toward our close here? Clint's asking, from a zero loss perspective, how do you leverage the E2E data to identify opportunities for improvement?
Joe, do you want to start?
Sure. So, you know, as we have the digital thread throughout the entire value stream, obviously we're seeing into spots that we probably didn't see into in the past throughout the process. So again, it's generating a lot of data. And our first step is to understand, what are we trying to achieve as an organization? And then once we have that, and then we go look for the problems, what's standing in our way of achieving those objectives. And that's where we start to mine the data from the end-to-end digital thread. And then we go through the same process of prioritization to figure out what's the most impactful thing. I'm not sure if I'm covering your zero loss perspective portion of it, but if you could tell us a little more what you're thinking there, we can try to answer it.
Any more comments on that one, Clint? You're welcome to unmute yourself as well. We'll take that as a no. Any questions left from our attendees?
Can I ask one very quick one? Joe, you had mentioned we had gone from a desert to an ocean of data, right? And obviously within Lean, there's Kaizen events and Gemba walks and things like that. Have you done those digitally? Are you doing digital Gemba walks or digital Kaizen? Are those things that have been built?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have done digital Kaizens. The digital gimbal walks, I would say we haven't done those like on a regular cadence, but when there is a problem, we do the same kind of go-see mentality where we're actually sitting down with people working in the process and seeing how they're interacting with the digital thread and visiting the Gemba that way. So yes, we are definitely doing digital Kaizen, and we've done digital Gemba walks, but only when there's a problem we're trying to solve. But that's a really good thought of doing those on a more regular basis.
What I would add is that through the pandemic, we've actually ramped up our use of digital for sharing best practices and reporting out and doing what we call achievement walks, right, where the participants of some of these projects share their results, and we've been able to take that from being what was largely a local activity in the past to being truly global, right, by using conference technologies and video like we are today. And we could have done that earlier, but I think the pandemic forced us to rethink this, and it's actually led to a much better process of sharing and achievement, our achievements. So that's been a really great addition.
Yeah, it really has improved that. It's a happy outcome from a terrible situation, and it's something we'll probably continue on in some form.
Absolutely.
True. I think we will see a lot further continued opportunities for this digital collaboration that we've built in over the last year. But I want to thank you, Rob and Joe. This was really a great presentation, a lot of really good information today. As I mentioned to the attendees, we will have the recording and presentation available to you on the MLC website shortly. So if you want to check back again, be sure to do that. All right.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll show you a couple calls we got coming up here in the MLC world, if I can get my slides to move again. Oh my, I don't know what's going on here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so May 13th, we have a scheduled session on moving on from homegrown MES to more robust solutions. So something you want to talk about if you're have been upgrading some of your digital infrastructure within your factory. It was definitely a topic that was pretty popular within our agenda setting call back in January. So you want to make sure you are here with us for that. And then on July 15th, we will have next year presenting on organizational structures for combined IT/OT integration and improved competitiveness. Again, one of those very popular topics that everybody seems to want to know about. So we hope to see you then, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks, Joe and Rob.
Thanks, all. Take care.
Yep, thank you.